Good morning, it's Saturday, and we're in March. I think it's March 21st. Here's a literary anecdote for you. In Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's play, Brutus and Cassius wondered if maybe Caesar's got to go because they want a republic, not a dictatorship. And so they've hatched an assassination plot. The day before the assassination plot, a sage wise man says to Caesar, "Beware the Ides of March." Caesar says, "Oh, okay." Well, the next day he shows up at the Roman Forum and sees the sage sitting on the steps and says to him, "Well, the Ides of March are come," as if to say, well, see, the day's here, nothing bad's happened. The sage comes back with, "Aye, Caesar, but not gone." And later that day, Brutus and Cassius will murder Caesar. And when Caesar sees Brutus with the knife in his hand, he says, "Et tu, Brute? And you too, Brutus? Then fall, Caesar." As if to say, if my best friend turns against me, I may as well die. Kind of like Finney and Jean. Finney loved Jean. He cared about him deeply, but Jean had too much envy. Maybe Finney had to die. We're in chapter 14. Tess has not died. And it is August, the harvest season, and the vapors and the warm beams are ready for the harvest. Hardy writes that nature is probably a saner religion than any other. And he might have something there. He personifies the sun as shining on the earth, and it's harvest time. It's a good time of the year. The earth is at its peak of ripeness. But opposite this ripeness is something new, and this is a theme that Hardy now brings into the novel, and it's the advent of the Industrial Revolution. It's in its very early stages. We will see other evidence of it as we work our way along in the novel. And the evidence is a harvesting machine, the mechanical, which is painted fiery liquid red. Red, the color of blood, bloodshed in the novel. The field, however, you can't just rely on the mechanical reaper just yet. The field has to be opened or started by hand labor. But we know that automation is someday going to eliminate the need for hand labor, but we still need it now. So there are two groups of men and other of women, and they're harvesting, but the machine is replacing a lot of the work that the hand laborers do. And the machine is going in a square around the field. And as it does so, it keeps reducing the standing corn in a square. And in the middle of the field, and seeking safety in the middle of the field, are the rabbits, the hares, the snakes, rats, mice, all retreating inward, trying to avoid being slaughtered, but it's inevitable. They're trapped. They're going to die. Does this have something to do with Tess? Is she trapped? We'll have to see. They'll be put to death by sticks and stones of the harvesters. There are many women out there, and this is what Tess has fallen to. She has fallen to the level of a simple farm laborer in the field. She's not tending birds for a rich woman anymore. This is hard, monotonous work. And the women are dressed in a certain way for this work. The older ones are dressed in a covering dress or a wrapper. The younger ones are not dressed this way. There's that theme, the passing of the old ways. Dressed poorly, dressed well, no matter how she's dressed, Tess still stands out because she's so beautiful. This is monotonous, repetitive work. And Hardy writes this phrase, "Holding the corn, she is in an embrace like that of a lover." Tess has not had a lover yet. She's had somebody who sexually assaulted her, but she has not had a lover. And the stalks of the corn pierce her arm and make her bleed a little bit, bloodshed. And she has been scarred. And we know she's been scarred by that traumatic incident. He says that she's somewhat changed. Hardy does. Well, she's really changed. But she's decided after being depressed for a while, she's resolved to come out, make herself useful and productive, and go and do outdoor work in her home village. Hardy writes that the movements of these women are like dancers in a quadrille. We're reminded of the dance that happened in the meadow at the beginning of the novel. And then her sister shows up holding a baby. It's Tess's baby. So the result of her sexual assault is the birth of a child. At her young age of 16, 17 years old, Tess feels shame. They sit down, the workers do, to eat lunch. One of them has a stone jar. There's alcohol in it. Alcohol seems to follow Tess in this novel. It's in her home with her father, and here it is in the field. One of them offers her a drink. She doesn't want any. But despite all this, Hardy says that she still has courage. In a stealthy yet courageous movement, she's going to feed her child. She's going to breastfeed her child. Men turn their faces. There's some regret. There's some pity. But Hardy says she feels a great ambivalence toward her child. Ambivalence, the Latin root bi, too. On the one hand, she loves it and kisses it. On the other, she kind of wishes it were in the churchyard. She sometimes wishes she were dead in the churchyard as well. And one of the women looks at her and says to one of the other women, "It is wonderful what a body can get used to in time." And we're reminded of how strong Tess is. She is incredibly strong. It's a lot of pity in that group. They all feel sorry for her. But her resolution brought her into the field to do some work, and common sense says, I've got to be productive, and so she's here. Now, she could have laid around in the house and been depressed and not done anything. That's not Tess. But Hardy now points out that after a certain amount of time, everybody's sort of forgotten about Tess's dilemma. It's Tess who feels badly about it still. Her hyperconscience is still working. But Hardy says she still has calmness and she still has dignity. Remember, just because she was the victim of this horrible event, she doesn't lose her dignity. They get in wagons to ride home from the field. There are some girls there, and they start singing the song about a ballad of a maid who went into the merry green wood and came back a changed person. And this takes us back to Joan Durbeyfield's ballad about the girl who lied down in yonder green grove. And this bothers Tess. Of course, she's that girl. She's come back a changed person. Now, and this is at the point where you think, geez, it can't get much worse for Tess. It gets worse. The baby gets sick. It's made no offense against society. It wasn't its fault that it was born. But she has a problem. It hasn't been baptized. And her maternal instinct tells Tess that she's got to do something to save this child. And one night, the parson knocks on the door of their house, and Jack Durbeyfield, who's drunk, he just got back from Rolliver's, turns the parson away angrily, saying, I've got too much pride to let you in my house. Alcohol again harms Tess. And Tess is put in a terrible dilemma. She's in a lot of torment. What is she supposed to do? Her child isn't baptized. And she cries out, Oh, merciful God, have pity upon my poor child. Heap as much anger as you want to upon me and welcome, but pity the child. She's got to do something. Time's running out, baby's fading fast. And so she awakens her little sisters and brothers, gets the basin, fills it with water, and conducts the baptism ceremony. She is strong enough to save the child herself. No one's going to help her. No one comes to her aid. Remember that line Hardy wrote? Where is Tess's guardian angel? Well, Tess's guardian angel isn't around. And she has to name the baby, and she names it Sorrow. What could be more appropriate? A child that's born as a result of a sexual assault, a child that's wanted but unwanted, a child that it's too bad it's in the world, and Tess has a ton of sorrow. And now she's going to have more sorrow. Dips her hand in the basin, starts conducting the ritual, and she becomes bold and triumphant in doing it, and transforms in front of her siblings into a towering and awful divine personage conducting this religious ritual. She is defying convention. And so passed away sorrow the undesired. Her baby dies, and now she has to deal with that grief. And now she's got the next problem. The child has to be buried. And so she has to go to the church to talk to a parson. And this is our second parson in the novel. He was the one who came out to the house to try and baptize the child. And so she approaches him and says, I did this ceremony. Would it be the same as if you had done it? And Hardy writes, the man and the ecclesiastic fought within him, and the victory fell to the man. He looks at her, he sees her beauty, and he says, yes, it would be the same. But when she asks if the child can be buried in the churchyard, he says, oh, wait a minute, that's a different matter. That involves the entire congregation, and I can't do that. And so once again, conventional religion has harmed Tess. And she's so angry, she said, I don't like you. I'll never come to your church no more. And she might not set foot in a church ever again. And she leaves. But Tess somehow gets a hold of the local sexton, the local gravedigger, pays him with a quart of ale. There's that alcohol again. And money motivates people. And he digs a small grave in a hidden part of the churchyard. And she makes a cross, and she gets a vase and fills it with flowers and goes to the churchyard and places the cross on her baby's grave and places the flowers there as well. She takes charge of the whole thing, and she gets her baby buried in the churchyard. This is how powerful and strong she is, and she doesn't know it. Chapter 15. She is now, Hardy says, incapacitated. Who wouldn't be? You're the victim of a sexual assault. You have a baby, the baby dies. Who wouldn't be incapacitated? But he says, while she may be dormant, it's winter, the death season, she still has her dignity, and she still has her pride. And her perspective begins to change. And she changes a lot. And Hardy writes, she changed from a simple girl to a complex woman. Symbols of reflectiveness passed into her face and a note of tragedy at times into her voice. She is an adult now, not a girl anymore. And she's demoralized, but not for long. And here I have to quote Sylvester Stallone from the last Rocky film he did. And I'm going to misquote him, probably, but he says to his son, life is not defined by how many times you get knocked down. It's defined by how many times you get up and keep moving forward. And Tess is going to get up, and she's going to move forward because she's very strong. And so she recuperates, and here's spring. Spring's coming on pretty strong right now. It's the rebirth season. Tess is being reborn. And finds out that there's a job as a dairymaid in a distant dairy in the valley of the Var River. Rivers are made of water. Water equals life. And so she decides that she's resolved that she's going to go there. She also resolves she's not going to think, talk about, want to hear about the D'Urbervilles anymore. She wants to deny her ancestral heritage. And a new place means a new start. It's the place kind of where her forefathers were, the D'Urbervilles. It's at Talbothays Dairy. And Hardy uses at the end of this chapter, chapter 15, that she is invincible. We know what that means. She can't be beat. The title of phase the third is The Rally. And you know what a rally is. It's when a team that's trailing comes back and wins in the end. And it's exciting and it's invigorating to see it happen. This is a rally. Maybe things will be okay for Tess. We're now in chapter 16. Excuse me. After 2 years, she leaves home. This is her second departure from the only land she's ever known, ever lived in. And she knows that staying there isn't going to do any good. And she hopes that by leaving, she will model for her young siblings what they've got to do. They've got to get out of that house with those two irresponsible parents and get out on their own. As she's walking along, a farmer comes along in his cart, offers her a ride, and she accepts. Courageous thing to do. But this isn't Alec D'Urberville, and that's not a fancy horse. This guy just wants to give her a ride somewhere. But the ride reminds her of the cart ride with Alec D'Urberville. We are reminded in this chapter that when Tess is in nature, she's comfortable, she's happy, and she had never visited this part of the country before, so she's a stranger in a strange land, but it's a nice land. They go by the church in which the perished bones of her ancestors are. It's a place called Kingsbeer. She doesn't want to go there. And the journey is another journey in a wagon, but this time she's headed there to the Valley of the Great Dairies. This is the part of England that provides all the dairy products for the rest of England. It's a new land and a different land. And again, I said it's the valley of the Var River, and rivers equal life. Her spirits are rising, and she's in a better mood, walking along. And she's trying out several ballads. She's singing. And she tries them, and she's starting to feel happy. But right away, she pulls back and thinks, well, wait a minute. Perhaps I don't quite know the Lord as yet. Considering all the adversity she's had, she's not quite convinced she can be happy in a place like this. Hardy writes that women do, as a rule, live through such humiliations and regain their spirits and again look about them with an interested eye. Hardy liked his female characters, and he likes Tess. And he's pointing out that women can bounce back. Men, on the other hand, not so much. And so Tess arrives at the barn of Dairyman Richard Crick just at milking time. The cows are walking in. They're trooping in. The herd is trooping in. And the earth here, it's early spring, late spring, is fertile. Fertility, that's what's going on here. And that is chapters 14, 15, and 16 of Tess of the D'Urberville.